Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's a little bit windy today, so I hope you can hear me all right, but we're out here pulling some more trail cameras out on a piece of public land. Going to be breaking down a little bit of the data from all of the videos that we pull off of this camera. I use this one particularly because it's at a really cool feature. As I spin around here, you're going to look and see that we are right at the end of a point on a ridge system, and at the bottom of this ridge systems, there's these really big crop fields that acted as a very good destination food source for these deer. So I already checked this camera one time. It was actually on Halloween, and throughout the month of October there's a lot of really consistent buck activity that would come from the bottom of this point up and over the top in the morning, hitting this scrape and then working their way up this spine into what was a pretty consistently big briar thicket, and they would have that consistent travel usually before first light in the morning, getting back into that briar thicket to bed down for the day. And then at night we would get the activity in the complete opposite direction, where those bucks would be coming out of that briar thicket, hitting this scrape, dropping down over top of the point and heading down to those crop fields for the evening. So what makes this spot really interesting is that it's not necessarily that those bucks were bedded right out on the point overlooking that crop field. They were actually up the spine of the ridge a little bit, and they were tucked in that briar thicket. And one of the reasons that I think that it laid out that way is that the primary access route on this public land is beyond that briar thicket. So if they got into that, they were a little bit closer to an area where they could monitor a lot of the hunting pressure. And there was really no way, because the spine is so narrow, that you could get past these bucks without climbing some pretty serious elevation to catch them going from where they're bedding out to that primary food source. So one of the things that we're also going to be trying to accomplish while we're out here today is identifying a few trees that we could potentially set up on around this scrape location in particular, so we can either come in here in the morning and try to catch those bucks on their way back to bed, or come in here for the evening and take a very long looping route in here and set up around this scrape location to try to catch those bucks when they're on their way down to the food. So we have a couple different options of how exactly we can approach this. I'm going to go ahead and see what we can find from a tree perspective to find a pretty good setup for the future, and then of course we're going to break down this trail camera data. So I'm going to go ahead, pull this cam, look for some sheds on the way out, and then we'll break down some videos once I get back to the office. Okay guys, we made it back to the office. We were able to look over all of the trail camera footage from this scrape location. After that pull on Halloween, the buck movement and really the deer movement in general fell off a cliff. And that's not really out of the ordinary for trail cameras like this for me. And I believe that the reason is that with it being up on top of a ridge system out towards that point in more open habitat, easier place to access, when that hunting pressure really starts to pick up, this is a very popular place for people to visit. So I already had it in mind that this was probably only going to be an early season location. Trail camera really confirmed that for me. So moving forward, I know that this is going to be a place that I would like to target in the early season. So quickly, I'm going to go ahead and check out the map, show you guys a little overview of the area, and then I'm going to dive into a little bit of the footage. Taking a look at the map here, I just wanted to point out where that trail camera location was, and then my best guess on how the bucks are using this ridge system based off of the trail camera footage. Now, right out on this point is where the trail camera was overlooking the scrape, and then as I mentioned in the earlier part of the video, it's a little bit different than the typical point where I'm trying to identify buck bedding. A little bit further up the spine of the ridge, there's this really dense briar thicket that, after going in and taking a little bit closer look today, there's a lot of buck rubs in there. There's definitely some bedding going on. Now, the actual buck movement from the footage was very consistent in the sense that it was coming from the direction of the briar thicket, going past the trail camera scrape location, and then dropping down over the point of the ridge in the evening. And then in the morning, it was doing the complete opposite. It was coming up from the bottom of the ridge, working past the trail camera scrape location, and heading towards that briar thicket. So the question still remains, because there were multiple bucks on the trail camera, was this just more of a satellite bedding area? Was it a bedding area that was used by one of these bucks and the other bucks were just using it as a travel route? It's going to take a little bit more time for me to fully understand exactly what this travel was by the bucks, but nonetheless, lots of really cool footage that I'm going to share with you guys now. So the first couple videos I want to show you here is of a buck who was a pretty consistent visitor at this trail camera location. He was visiting this camera location at night the first couple weeks of the season. So you'll see here he's coming from behind the camera, which is the area of that dense briar thicket, hitting the scrape location and then dropping over the point of the hill, heading down towards those crop fields. This was at October 12th at about 8:30 p.m. And as you can see, he spent a lot of time visiting this scrape location before heading down the hill. Now, he visited this scrape location a ton, like I said, throughout the beginning of October. This video is actually the last time that I caught him on this camera, October 18th, right around 8:30 p.m. again, and very consistent behavior that he shows as he visited this scrape location, always interacting with it before dropping down the over the point of the hill. So with this being a little bit later on, closer towards that middle of the night time frame, that tells me that this buck probably was not bedded in that briar thicket, mainly because if he was, the activity that I would be getting on that camera would probably be a little bit closer to sunset. There's a lot of different terrain features that he could have been bedded on outside of that briar thicket that I pointed out earlier in the video. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and dive back into this piece of public land, start to poke around a little bit more and see if I can get any type of sign of where this buck may have been bedded. That would be a little bit further away, which would lead him to hitting this scrape location right around that 8:30 time frame, which he was very consistent on in that early part of the season. Now for a couple of the morning occurrences on this trail camera, the consistent theme with the morning videos that I did get at this scrape location, where a lot of them were during shooting light hours, and all of the activity was coming up over the point, visiting this scrape location and heading towards that briar thicket. This buck is a really good example. He was here a few times throughout the month of October. This particular session is on October 24th at about 8:45 in the morning. One of the better bucks that was visiting this scrape location, and it was very consistent where he was always coming up over that point in the morning and heading towards that briar thicket. This next buck is a really good example of these bucks not necessarily needing to hit the scrape in order to pass through this trail camera location, but he does show the behavior patterns of coming up over the top of that point and heading towards the briar thicket. This was actually the last good buck that I got on this trail camera, October 28th at 7:45 in the morning. You'll see that he's just kind of slowly strolling through the area, working directly towards that briar thicket. So again, very good assumption that he was likely bedded there or somewhere very close by, with this being right around the beginning of those daylight hours. So there's a lot of really good takeaways from running a trail camera at this scrape location for the entirety of a season. First of those being that this is really only a location that I want to target in October. After October 31st, the buck movement was non-existent. So October 1st to Halloween, I can craft a strategy for this area. Understanding the buck movement, the second of those, there's a really consistent flow of activity where these bucks would come from the top of the ridge and then work their way down in the evening, and then vice versa, start at the bottom of the ridge and work their way up in the morning. Using that information, I can come up with my third takeaway, which is crafting a strategy to actually hunt these bucks. There wasn't really much rhyme or reason as far as wind conditions, weather conditions, or anything like that, other than the consistent up in the morning, down in the evening. I did find a few really good trees where I think I can hunt around this scrape location, and it sets up really well with the primary access being further up the spine of this ridge. Knowing that the deer aren't going to be there in the morning, I can get out here extremely early, get set up in one of these trees around the date range where these bucks were daylighting in the morning, and hopefully have a really good hunt. That's going to do it for today's video. Thank you guys again for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can see all of the latest videos. If you like these trail camera breakdowns, please let me know in the comments down below. I really enjoy breaking down different photos and videos like this, so if you have an idea for how I can do it in the future, just let me know down in those comments, and we'll see you guys in the next one.